And I think it's 4:02. We're going to start. Are we all ready? We're going to get started. Okay. Hello. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this virtual space. My name is Shira Greenberg. I'm the founder and artistic director at Keshet Dance and Center for the Arts, which is based here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I am incredibly honored to be joined by so many incredible members of our amazing community here today for this roundtable conversation about this critical intersection of arts and juvenile justice. So before we go any further, we're first going to start with a land acknowledgement, which is something we do at Keshet for all of our programming, acknowledging the place and history of the land from which we present to you today. There's also a link coming in your chat box with more information about this and a tool to find information about the lands you are on as well. So you're welcome and encouraged to share with us the lands you're joining us from in the chat if you would like. And oh, I'm echoing. I'm not sure why, but you have me in echo version. So this is up on your screen, but I'm also going to read this for us today. At Keshet, we believe that one of the roles of the arts is to make visible that which others have tried to make invisible. We also believe that it is not the responsibility of those whom others have attempted to make invisible to remind us that they are still here. Therefore, as a committed ally and as artists, Keshet Dance and Center for the Arts wishes to acknowledge and recognize the Indigenous people and place where we stand, and the Pueblo, ancestral Pueblo, Navajo, Apache, and other Indigenous peoples who have had a presence in New Mexico and who have traveled this land. We give gratitude to the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We pay our respects and honor their ancestors, past, present, and future, and recognize their continued existence and contributions to our society. Please take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds and celebrate the resilience and strength of the Indigenous peoples of this land, which we gather on today. We would also like to acknowledge the many peoples who did not arrive on this land by choice. We welcome everyone, however you arrived here in this space, today and always. Thank you all so much. And again, in the chat is a link if you would like to find the lands that you are tuning in from. If you would like to add that, you're welcome to throughout the program today. So next, I also want to say thank you to the many incredible funders and sponsors who make all of our work at Keshet possible. There are a lot of incredible funders in our community, locally and nationally, that are supporting Keshet overall. So I just want to thank them. There's 2 slides worth of these folks, so hold on for a moment. But I do want to say thank you to the Albuquerque Community Foundation, New Mexico Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts, the City of Albuquerque, Bernalillo County Urban Enhancement Trust Fund, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, WestAF, United Way of Central New Mexico, the McCune Charitable Foundation, Vintage Albuquerque, the Maurice Amato Foundation. More coming, another slide in a moment here. And Aroha Philanthropies, Jewish Federation of New Mexico, New Senda Foundation, PNM Resources Foundation, Sandia Foundation's Hugh and Helen Woodward Fund of the Albuquerque Community Foundation, Southwest Capital Bank, and Wells Fargo Foundation. So these folks have supported all of our programming overall. And next, I want to say thank you to these incredible corporate fans who support our strange virtual season that we are in right now. And these are all local organizations who, even in the midst of a pandemic, are supporting local arts. So thank you so much to Adams and Crow Law Firm, Ray Law, Dance Medicine of New Mexico, A+ Marketing Consultants, Annapurna's World Vegetarian Cafe, Green Jeans Farmery and Lone Sun Builders, Loveless Health Systems, Presbyterian Healthcare Services, Red Rock Roasters, Utility Agency, Granberg Law, Kid Power Therapy Associates, Lindsay Shuttlesworth with Q Realty, Peacock Law, R&R Beauforth Remodeling, Stone Age Climbing Gym, The Daily Grind, Thrive Consulting, and Whitener Law. Thank you so, so much. And last, but certainly not least, today specifically is supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the New Mexico Humanities Council. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If we were in person, we would all be cheering very loudly. I know we're on mute right now, but in our hearts, we are cheering loudly for all of these incredible contributors. So just a brief introduction about Keshet and some context for today's conversation. So our organization, Keshet, is housed at the Keshet Center for the Arts here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The heart of the organization is Keshet Dance Company, which feeds and is fed by 3 intersecting program areas: education and engagement, classes and performances for all ages and abilities, the Ideas and Innovation Community, which our business resource center and a residency-based makerspace for arts entrepreneurs, and Arts and Justice Initiatives, which includes juvenile justice direct service, research and evaluation, policy and advocacy work, and community connectivity. So while Keshet has been providing direct service, dance, and mentorship programming within the juvenile justice system for the past 25 years, it's thanks to the incredibly generous support of the McCune Charitable Foundation and the deep and incredibly meaningful investment of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation that we've been able to use the knowledge and experiences and relationships that we've developed over the past 25 years with the fantastic people and organizations doing work in this field for many, many, many years to expand these direct service efforts and really begin to examine and take action towards deeper systems change, really investigating what is the role of the arts in juvenile justice systems change, and how are the arts a critical component in these initiatives, and how do we use artistic practice to bring new elements of community together, think creatively, and generate meaningful long-term systems change. So we are here today to talk about this important intersection of arts and justice, and I'm truly, truly grateful to each of you for tuning in today in your busy lives and hearing more about this. So we are incredibly lucky to have with us today as our guide through this quite meaty conversation, the one and only Elsa Menendez. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Elsa, and I'm going to hand it over to her. She is an incredibly beautiful artist, educator, facilitator, human. For the past 35 years, she's been working in theater around the world as a writer, director, producer, performer, change maker. She is a facilitator and teacher of all sorts of local, national, and international workshops and symposiums and retreats. She has been the co-facilitator of Cultivating Women's Leadership Retreat through Bioneers. She's a co-founder of the Women Leading Change Initiative. She served as the artistic director and core artist of Tricklot Company and as a member of the Sophia Center's Wild Leadership Facilitation Team. Her work in theater education also led her to teaching, writing, and directing in a men's medium security prison, which led to the co-founding of Boom Theater, a theater company within the prison comprised of individuals serving the longest sentences. She's formerly the director of performing arts at the National Hispanic Cultural Center, and currently, among her many hats, is a field representative for New Mexico's U.S. Senator Martin Heinrich. There are so many other things I could tell you about her, but I'm just going to let you instead hang out with her here on Zoom. So we are honored to have her with us today, and take it away, Elsa.
Thank you, Shira. Goodness, I got excited and a little tired just hearing that little list of introductions. I am so honored. I'm so honored to be here today to function as a support and moderator for this conversation. This panel of people that we're about to get to hear from is a remarkable group. And I'm also just tremendously honored to be a field representative for Senator Heinrich and to be able to do this kind of work as part of the outreach that I get to do from his office. So thank you, Shira and Keshet and everybody on the panel for all the work that you're doing in this space. Before we get officially started, I'm gonna do a little bit of Zoom etiquette and give you like an overview of today's event. And then we get to jump in with a beautiful clip that will show us, be an example of some of the work that we're going to be discussing today, or the kind of work. So a couple of quick things. I have some awesome notes that Shira helped put together. So I'm gonna stick to those. A reminder to please stay on mute unless you're one of the people speaking at the time. That'll help us to cut down on those kind of echoey moments. When even during the Q&A, if you're not talking, you can stay on mute, and then of course unmute yourself, panelists and others as we need to if we're participating in the question and answer section. If you are listening to these different panelists and you start to have questions and you want to capture them, we encourage you to put them into the chat box. We have some amazing Keshet team members who are going to be helping to capture and hold on to those questions for the Q&A section. If you're having any kind of connectivity challenges or lags, just a reminder that sometimes turning off your phone. I have all these notifications I haven't figured out how to turn off on my new computer. Turning off your phone can sometimes help with your video, or turning off your video can help. And I just want to also just add to that, that we all continue to extend to each other, I hope, the grace of this new space that we're in, right? We're in technology world, and we're all arriving from maybe other technological challenged meetings. So we'll just offer each other grace should we have bumps along the way. Also, it's allergy season. There's all kinds of things going on. So we'll extend grace as things go. We want to encourage you to pick the kind of view that you prefer. You can do gallery view, which is what I've got, where we can see everybody at once, or you can do speaker view, where the highlighted person obviously is the biggest face on the screen. There will be a couple points where we'll be highlighting the roundtable participants, and that will just allow you to see those 9. Okay, and the last sort of housekeeping Zoom etiquette suggestion is that we do have a live transcription feature, so you can turn that off on the bottom, on or off on the bottom of your screen, and there's a closed captioned button. And so if you need transcription, please do that. You just hover near the bottom of your screen and you should be able to see that. It says live transcript on mine. Okay, and then let's do a little overview of the event today. So we're going to start with a really brief clip of some of the artistic work that was recently created through the Keshet programming. Then I'll have a few prompt questions for the folks on the roundtable today. That'll include introducing themselves, and then a sort of a group discussion question. And then we'll have some time for community questions and answers, a Q&A conversation. We are recording this event, so just a little note for you that we are recording this event. If you want to be off screen, we invite you to do that. Just a reminder that some of these topics that we're talking about can be sensitive, so let's trust that there is respect amongst us, and hold respect as we have this conversation. And remember, because we are being recorded, to be thoughtful about the information that you're sharing. Okay, so I feel like I'm such a teacher. I want to go, are there any questions? But we're coming to those later. If there are questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. So we're going to start next with a clip. And this is a clip from Keshet's Movement for Mercy production. This was created over a number of years. It was as a collaboratively built piece of work that was created by artists both inside and outside of the prison walls. The choreography was essentially translated through the Keshet faculty who teach every day within the juvenile facilities. And what you're about to see was brought to fruition after the quarantine began, with footage from before and after quarantine. It was created, directed, and edited by one of the Keshet youth leaders, Juliana Gorena, who's one of our panelists today. So that's very exciting. And I think that's the basic context that we have for this clip. So we'll have a look at this.
After we finished this work in progress showing of Movement for Mercy in February, I began thinking about the unjust systems and cycles that keep presenting themselves in the United States, which led me to explore a new work to be added into the production. This new piece, currently a work in progress itself while we remain unable to gather in person, uses various movement phrases, gestures, and clips from different moments in time to explore this topic. I asked all of the dancers to take moments of the work that we created to digest the ramifications of these cycles. This is the result.
downtrodden. We are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights.
We must take sides, for neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim.
Take our words out of context because they're afraid, because we speak truth. We speak truth to power.
He's trying to stop the movement. He's going to try to do it with repression, political repression. He's going to try to sever us off from everything that happened in the 60s, just the way they did it in the 50s.
So if you want to come down Friday to hold up a sign against Humpty Dumpty, hold up your sign. You dig? If you want to holler boo, holler boo. You dig?
100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination.
You are black, if you are brown, if you are indigenous, and if you are poor, this system is rigged and it is rotten to the core.
I make you uncomfortable. Try a cramped slave ship, but wait, slavery is over now. It's just called the prison system.
Black Lives Matter, for example, represents the return of the Black Panther Party.
When they say all lives matter, it sounds like white fragility. It sounds like whites only water fountains, like water hoses, like attack dogs, like Reaganomics, like the war on drugs, like the cheers of a lynch mob.
Far too long, we have lived with the discomfort of being a second-class citizen.
Nos trataban más feos que a los animales.
And so our struggle must continue, and if our struggle is to continue, we have to support the people who are the victims of repression.
This needs to change for me.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Yeah, we can do all kinds of ways of sharing our appreciation. So we're gonna jump into the roundtable now, and we have an incredible group of people to speak with and to hear from. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just introduce them by name and invite each person to share what they do in the world, how they want to, share what their work is, and to frame it within the context also of this question of how this intersection of arts and the juvenile justice system is relevant to the work that they are doing, and or the spheres of community within which they're working, or within which they're engaging, and to think about that, how that is relevant, bringing into play both successes and challenges. So again, we'll just start with a name, and I'll introduce you and invite you into the space to share a little bit about how arts and the juvenile justice system is relevant to the work you're doing and the communities with which you engage. And we'll ask each of the participants to take about 5 minutes or a little less if that's possible, but we encourage and invite you to speak. And then after that, we'll shift into more of a conversation. So I'm going to start by introducing and bringing into the circle here Imani Brooks. Imani, would you join us and share a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Imani Brooks. I am a youth leader and also a co-chair for Keshet's Arts and Justice Initiatives Youth Leadership Council. So if you heard Shira speaking about earlier, how Keshet Center for the Arts also has initiatives that they do, the mentorship and dancing. The council is also one of those initiatives. And so our 3 goals, I'm going to do a kind of little brief description, would be education, resources, and community. And with those 3 goals, we're trying to educate our youth and our elders in our community about the justice system and the correctional facilities inside their state or wherever they're living at, so that they can be proactive and know about bills and laws that are being passed, and also how they can propose their own bills and laws. So a lot of that has to do with education. I want to give highlight to Julie on that video. To me personally, it was very powerful and I almost started crying. Feeling like I don't know how to describe it. The arts is more of a feeling. You can't describe how you really feel, to be liberated or to feel free, or to just be happy. There's so many different things that you can do with the arts, and as far as expressing yourself and being genuine to who you are. You don't have to be a certain person or put up this fake front, to express yourself in that way. And I think sometimes people get boxed in on what the arts can be. A lot of people think it can just be drawing or dancing, but it can be so much more than that, as far as music or imagery, screenplay. So I think the arts play a big role in the justice system as far as being therapeutic, which I think we need more of in the justice system. Before we can tell somebody what they're doing wrong, you at least need to acknowledge what they're doing right. So letting them be able to be themselves, and learn from their mistakes and not be scared, because there's only so much you can have somebody do through fear. Yeah, that's what arts in the justice system mean to me.
Thank you so much, Imani. I'm looking forward to hearing from you again as we open up the conversation in a few minutes. So I'd love to pass the energy of introduction next to another one of the youth leaders, and that is Juliana Gorena, who, as you know, was the creator, director, and editor of that clip that we just watched. So Juliana, can you join us and share a little bit about yourself? And again, how does this intersection of arts and the juvenile justice system, or juvenile justice, how is that relevant to the work that you're doing? How is it relevant to the spheres or the communities in which you work? And what are some of the successes and challenges you encounter?
Hi everyone, I'm Juliana, and I'm also youth leader at Keshet, as well as a co-chair for the Keshet Arts and Justice Initiatives Youth Leadership Council. And I had the opportunity to choreograph the piece that was shown in the beginning. And as I explained in the video beforehand, that piece was created to symbolize like the endless cycles of injustice that we face, at least in the United States. And I was able to work with Imani, who's also on this roundtable, and it was a really incredible and unique experience. Originally, this piece was meant to be performed in person, but because of the pandemic, it was adapted to be virtual. Which I really ended up enjoying, because I was able to play with all the things I wouldn't normally be able to with a live piece, like adding pictures and videos. And I also got to take time like really editing it and mushing it how I wanted it to look. I think this piece is like a good example of the intersection between arts and justice. And I hope to do a lot more work like this in the future, but I think it's a like half and half, it's the justice and the art, and it like got sandwiched together. And not all arts and justice work will look like that, but I think it's just like a good example of the 50-50 that can happen. I'm also lucky enough to be able to work with an organization that provides me with a platform to share my voice in spaces like this and through art. Not only is it important for me personally to be able to express myself in this way, but everyone, especially those whose voices are typically silenced or ignored, deserve a space to be able to express themselves, whether that's through art or whatever else. I strongly believe in rehabilitation versus punishment within the juvenile justice system or any justice system. Which is one of the main goals of Keshet's Youth Council and M3 and everything like that. But I also know that we could be doing way more before children even start to get involved in the system at all. And I think that can be achieved through art as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Really appreciating, again, just beginning to get into this conversation. I'm going to pass the mic over to Albino Garcia from La Placita, and I'll invite you, Albino, to share a little bit about you and to and again, the way that your work is intersecting or how it's relevant with this conversation we're beginning here, arts and juvenile justice.
Wow. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I was a little late. I'm on somebody else's computer, so mine kind of had a little problem. But in a way, so honored to be here, especially amongst all of you. And so I'm with La Placita Institute. We've been, formalized for 17 years. I can't believe it. It seems like a blink of the eye. We're kind of a center of gravity for a lot of cool art as a part of our movement, as a part of our intervention, our traditional reclamation, culture, healing. Those of you who have been here and those of you who have not, just about every building here in our little organization, it has murals. And these murals are made up throughout those 17 years, and mostly by artists from all over, mostly young people, and not exclusively, but mostly system impacted people that been in the system. Arte has always been a critical component of our expression, of our culture. Again, we use it as an intervention, as a prevention, as a mobilization and organizing tool, as activism, as voice. I get out of the way myself personally. I can't draw or paint a darn thing. I can't sing or dance either, but I can sure get it organized here, right? And get out of the way and allow the generations to do what they do. You all know, those of you who have been around, you know that we do, Fresh Seeds. Fresh Seeds is one of our annual events where artists from all over now, even other countries, are starting to show up. Of course, we didn't have it this year because we have it in March, and that's when COVID hit us. We definitely are going to have it in 22, so get ready. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Artists from all over locally, they do workshops, they talk, kids come from all over. We throw up doors, old doors, we throw up canvases, and everybody's talking. We have a big stage. Last one, as a matter of fact, let me just say that, Secretary Holland came when and she spoke here, and she talked about her life, and expressed, here. And lo and behold, she became secretary. How honored is that, right? Supporting our art. Another event that we do here is hoodies for the homeless. People coming, speaking, gathering, donating. And the last one that we did, was it created tonnage of donations for the homeless. And it's really fun, not just the event, the gathering of all of these artists and people locally to come and express themselves through various ways, dance, music, expression, murals, everything. But it's what happens after the event, because then we all hit with our vans and our vehicles, and we hit the bosque, and we just go out and we give all of these clothes and these donations out to folks who are cold and need it and stuff like that. I don't know how much time, I don't want to take too much more, but the other thing is we have an art studio, and y'all know, many of you know Russell Urban. He spent a couple decades behind bars, and he's here. And when he came here, he started our ceramic art studio. And it became and still is an integral piece in intervention and diversion, healing and education, primarily but not exclusively for system impacted youth, in partnership with the county, YRC, Carmela, Judge and the rest of the folks know. So in a way, and we love partnering with all of you. So thank you. I want to give time to others. That's a little bit of us.
Thank you so much, Albino. It's really great to hear from you. And, I think many of us are big fans of La Placita and the work that you're doing there. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to invite into the square circle that we are on Zoom. I'll invite next in Sherry Kreider, and invite you, Sherry, to share a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the work you're doing and how it's relevant in this conversation of arts and juvenile justice. Sherry, you're on mute.
Unmute. Yeah, I don't have the practice of doing this Zoom thing. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. This conversation, the intersection of arts and juvenile justice, it's my heart. I believe that I know that for myself, art was instrumental in reconstructing a life that was involved in juvenile justice and the adult system. And it's just such a powerful tool, art. It's a sacred space. Art gives the possibility for emotional expression, for everything that system impacted people need, to be vulnerable, to express things that are so complicated. I just can't imagine the world, without art. So I'm essentially a product of being homeless and kind of my personal experiences. I brought that to a business platform, so to speak, and I run an art space. I have my own personal artistic practice that is largely based in social practice art. So I don't believe in making work about issues without directly impacting issues. I think there's a lot of visual artists that kind of love to make work and talk about it, but it doesn't impact any of the communities. And that's incredibly important to me. I run Sanitary Tortilla Factory, which is downtown. And, I say we a lot, but it's just me. And, that's a part of being a hustler and doing what I needed to do in system impacted people are some of the most resourceful people. It's remarkable. So an example of a project that I just finished up, if you are on Sunport on your way to the airport, we created a 10-foot by 50-foot mural of real histories of this region. We used, we had about 5 teaching artists, and we had 12 kids, 3 of them system impacted. And so it's a pretty big mural. If you're going to the airport, you should check it out and go to my website. And there's a lot going on with the project outside of that. But I am challenges, I would say, and maybe I'm working with the wrong people. Being a felon, I have found it incredibly difficult to work with system impacted youth. It took me over 2.5 years to work with kids in Camino because I had a felony and they denied my background check, but I was allowed to adopt 2 children 5 years before that. So, it was, and in my mind, that's one of the things, a resource that is, it's a no-brainer to have system impacted people working with system impacted people. So that's kind of my thing. Those are the people that have solutions and different ways of dealing with situations that I'm kind of going a little off track, so I'm just gonna drop it there. So thank you for being here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Appreciating the connection of what Albino mentioned about having system impacted people as well working in La Placita and the work that you're doing with Sanitary Tortilla Factory. I would love to bring into the conversation next Carmela Romero, who is with the Bernalillo County Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. And Carmela, if you would share a little bit about yourself and the work you're doing, and again, that intersection or the relevance of this conversation to the work you're doing and the people you work with.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm from Bernalillo County, as mentioned. I am the Alternatives to Detention Program Manager. I've been working in state government for 16 years now with youth who have been impacted in the juvenile justice system. Also, prior to that, I worked in the community with the Albuquerque Public School District, putting together a Girls Are Great gang intervention program. And so I spent a lot of my undergraduate work working with young people in elementary school on up. So I'm very happy to be here. As far as how art is relevant to my work, it provides an avenue for prevention, intervention, transition, and healing. As the Alternatives to Detention Program Manager, I've seen firsthand the effects at the Bernalillo County Youth Services Center, at the detention center, what art and impact art has on youth. We had prior, as Albino mentioned, we worked closely with Albino. We used to have a Beats program with the New Mexico Jazz Workshop. That was an opportunity for our youth to really tell their story to beats and really get to know each other and build community in a sense during these classes. I know Cachette has worked with our youth in the long-term facilities with the Children, Youth, and Families Department for years. And that work provides hope for those youth who are long-term incarcerated and some skill building with social emotional skills, stress relief, conflict resolution, helping with decision-making and building those interpersonal relationships and really building trust in this strong sense of community. So it's very powerful, the work that can be done in a short or long-term facility. As far as other items that we have currently in the Youth Services Center, we have what we call the Beat Within program, which allows youth to write and do some poetry and have conversations amongst each other and really have that space and time to really think outside the box and be creative in their own way. And so some of those poetry and items that the youth write are actually published in a journal nationally for other youth who are incarcerated. So we are able to share that activity and have the opportunity for youth to be involved in that activity if they wish to within the Youth Services Center. What I found also is we've been in touch with the New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence. That was really a powerful activity for me, myself. We've had youth who were alleged to have committed gun crimes and participate in an art activity. And I actually got to sit with many of our youth and share my story. I had a young nephew who was system impacted and he died from gun violence. And to actually sit at the table with these young people and hear, their stories and kind of share this moment with them. And it was really healing for me. And it was really healing, I think, for the youth to understand I'm not just an institutional person, I'm a person as well. And so that was really a powerful, impactful thing for me. And I continue to do that work. My hope is we will continue to have art available for our youth. I think one of the major challenges that I've seen over time in working with young people, especially the Girls Are Great program that I had, the young people, what I found is there's not, opportunities within school any longer. A lot of those programs have been cut. There's not further funding for youth to participate in arts within the schools or after school or have that opportunity. And the hope now with building this collaboration that we will have that opportunity for youth to, outside of the school, participate in arts. I think that could help in terms of what Imani and Julie talked about curbing delinquency, is just really providing that opportunity in the community for youth to have access. And unfortunately, we don't want it to happen before they come to the, happen when they're prior to the juvenile justice system, not that they finally get access while they're incarcerated. And so, that's, I think, the major challenge that I've seen over time in the community. And for me, art is very healing. I'm very passionate myself about art, and it's wonderful to see the power that youth have when they're engaged in art and civic engagement and understanding and moving us all forward, including us adults in the system. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmela. It's I'm excited for us to be able to all start to dig into the roundtable discussion soon. And yet we have all these amazing roundtable panelists to still meet. So I'd like to bring into the conversation Dr. Marisa Juarez from CNM and invite you to share a little bit about the work that you're doing and again, the relevance of arts and juvenile justice in your work and challenges and successes.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Marisa, as Elsa mentioned. I wrote down some things because I can talk forever and also have a timer. So I'm a full-time faculty member at CNM. I teach writing and honors courses there. Over the last few weeks, I've been reflecting on this question about the intersections of art and social justice and how it's relevant to the work I do as both a college educator and as a member of the Capoeirista community. And I consistently return to the theme of liberation. So first, as a Capoeirista, I'm involved in an art that blends music, movement, dance, and philosophy, but most important to this practice is a history rooted in liberation. So Capoeira's development as an art form coincides with the transatlantic slave trade, which took place in Brazil from about 1500 to 1888. And while the exact dates and locations of the origin are unknown, one thing is certain, scholars and practitioners of the art acknowledge that it was created by Africans and their descendants as a means of resistance to lived oppression. What we do know about capoeira is that it was born out of enslaved people's desire for freedom during one of the most abominable periods in human history. And through my own scholarly study of capoeira as an art form, which has included qualitative interviews and participant observations, I've learned that even contemporary capoeiristas, even people that are practicing today, map meaningful intersections between the art form's history and its potential for liberatory practice today. So with that in mind, I wanted to quote one of my interview participants, a teacher named Bizoro, who in the past had worked with disenfranchised youth in his community. And he identified the potential for the students he teaches. He said that capoeira provides a strategy for these youth to cope with the challenges of their marginalization. Quote, in general, they are going to have problems with just basically their day-to-day confrontations. And just capoeira itself, just letting them understand the history of being an oppressed people and how those oppressed struggled against a society and how they made themselves strong by uniting together, end quote. And around the world, sorry, I'm so nervous, I don't know why. Capoeira has been used as a tool for personal freedom and empowerment by UNICEF to help Syrian refugees cope with the trauma of forced displacement, by nonprofit organizations like Projeto Kirimure to enrich the lives of historically underserved youth in Itapúa, Bahia, and by numerous capoeira schools around the US, something as simple as offering Zoom schools or Zoom classes to help people cope with this pandemic living. As an educator at CNM, I strive for models of critical pedagogy that treat students as whole people with lives and concerns and material realities that affect their learning in every way. Like bell hooks, I believe in education as a practice of freedom. And I mean that in terms of freedom from oppressive institutional structures, including academic spaces, freedom from capitalism, freedom from self-imposed doubts, freedom from ideological stances that dehumanize and other people. I firmly believe that educators need to meet students where they are, to honor students' lived experiences and knowledge, by transparently making room for these experiences and knowledge in our classrooms, and to remove the barriers that impede students' chances for success, such as punitive class policies and grading policies. So one innovative program at CNM that directly relates to this conversation is FIRST, which stands for Formerly Incarcerated Students Reintegrated Success Team. This is a program at CNM that helps students who have been affected by the carceral system to successfully navigate college by connecting them to reentry resources, FIRST academic coaches who can offer guidance and support on navigating the demands of college and the demands of the criminal justice system, and that match them with peer mentors. So programs like FIRST, I think, offer students affected by the criminal justice system needed support that further ensures their path to liberation.
Thank you so much, Marisa. And I'm just going to pull a couple words that are popping from already our conversation: healing, resistance, liberation, freedom. It's very exciting to continue to add to this language that we're hearing from all of our panelists. So let's bring into the conversation Dr. Manuel Montoya from UNM. Manuel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Manuel, and I teach at UNM, and I try to think about the way that we connect this big thing we call planet Earth to the local and to the things that we consume and produce every single day. I spend a lot of time teaching classes called Planetary Issues in Global Markets. And that actually comes from a story I'll tell you that'll help kind of describe why I connect arts and juvenile justice in a very specific way. So about 7 years ago, I was at a conference where we were having a discussion about the body count for World War II. And it was a very strange conversation, because at a certain point we got to asking who counted, and not only who counted, who counts when you count. And it turned into a pretty powerful conversation about the assumptions we make about the mass of lives that are affected by major issues, big and small, but violence done unto human beings. And as we had that conversation, I started to develop a lot of my research agenda related to how we make, and I was very moved by the land acknowledgement, because a lot of my work is about how we identify the invisible in the everyday world. This led me to work with the International Criminal Court. I was offered a special attaché for 1.5 years to work on issues related to how we connect uses of smartphones and other technologies and our consumer habits to the production of child soldiers throughout the world. And I spent a lot of time working with government leaders and with individuals from the International Criminal Court, trying to understand how the most effective way for us to identify, value, and create a system of justice that invited and created a space for not only for justice, but for redemption and for healing amongst those populations, particularly young children in the North Kivu province of the Congo, and where their community lies after participating in some of the atrocities that they took part in and they were recruited in and exploited to do. The main way that we were able to do that was through the use of arts and the humanities, by talking about the grand metaphors that connect our everyday consumer practices to the ways in which we exploit these children. And it brought me to think that sometimes when we say globalization, act local, think global, we often misread the fact that the global is local. It is not just some place so far away. And the only way for us to connect to those people who should be sitting in the room with us and who suffer and are exploited by the massive market activity that does take place throughout the world is to use grand metaphors. And the only way to use that is to use the arts and humanities. And so I'm very dedicated to this question of how these metaphors, I'm doing a research project now called Thinking About Markets and the Child Devourer. In other words, I'm thinking about how we artistically represent people who snatch away kids, like Hansel and Gretel, and all sorts of other types of stories about people who snatch Krampus, and what that storytelling tells us about the way that we actually do devour children on a daily basis in the real world. So that's part of my journey, and I'm very dedicated to using my academic work to support those endeavors.
Thank you so much, Manuel. Oh, we're getting so many great things in this space that we're sharing. Let's bring in the voice of Judge Marie Ward and hear a little bit about you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is an incredible panel, and I do not feel worthy at all, but I feel very grateful to be here and listen and learn from all of you and be exposed to some new things that I wasn't aware of that are going on in our community. So this is very exciting, and so I thank you for letting me be a part of it. So my name is Marie Ward, and I'm the presiding judge of the Children's Court Division here at the 2nd Judicial District. So that's Bernalillo County. My court presides over the most delinquency cases and child welfare cases in the state. But in large part, that's what I do, and it's not necessarily who I am. And so my story starts a bit earlier. I came to Albuquerque when I was just coming out of elementary school. I traveled here alone with my mom shortly after my parents had divorced. When we arrived, we didn't have a established place to live, and so I wasn't enrolled in school right away. And so it by the time I got enrolled, it was a little bit far into my middle school career, and that presented some challenges to start. Like many families, my family struggled with issues around substance abuse, mental health, financial instability and insecurity. And I have discussed that in other circles, kind of those circumstances really lended themselves for me to be involved in both systems that I currently preside over. In many respects, I absolutely should have and could have been involved in both the child welfare system and the juvenile justice system. During my young tenure, I made just countless unhealthy and unsafe choices. But as I was preparing for this presentation and this discussion today, it helped me reflect back on the circumstances at various times in my life and how art impacted me as a young person, and then what I see happen in my courtroom currently. And so for me, as a young person, having those opportunities to be involved in art, and I got the opportunity to be involved in dance and in theater when I was in high school. I was part of our dance club, and I lived in our theater department as much as I possibly could. And those opportunities were a way for me to express my emotions during that time, to have periods of time where I could be free from pain, free to express myself, be who I am, free from, in my own mind at least, judgment. And when that was my focus, when I was involved in the arts in that way, I was often much less likely to make really reckless decisions. I was less likely to do things like self-medicate. And I had moments where I was able to really thrive and succeed. While sometimes they were fleeting, they allowed me the opportunity to see myself have small successes in my life. And then as I got older, and ideally as my brain started to develop more, I could build on those successes as well. And so in my work today, I'm pretty siloed. As a judge, I don't get to engage with the youth like I would want to as a community member because of codes of professional conduct and the requirements of my job. But I am very, very fortunate to see real positive intersections of arts and how they intersect with the youth and the challenges that they face in our systems. I have been really fortunate and I think blessed to see young people share their creativity, their self-expression in different media. For many years, I've been the presiding judge of the Juvenile Drug Treatment Court here at the Second. And each year our young people have participated in the Children's Law Section Art Contest. And I have always found their work to be incredibly moving, incredibly eye-opening. You know, I get to know young people a little bit in the courtroom when they appear in front of me on a given case. When they're part of my program, I get to know them a little bit more because I get to see them every week and check in on how they're doing. But when I have the opportunity to see them through their art, it really gives me a better sense of, I think, who they are and what their journey has been. I have learned and discovered just amazing and beautiful things, painful things through our participants' artwork that they've shared with us. And I find it's a privilege to be able to kind of get to know them a little bit more through that expression. I've had youth in my cases in my courtroom do some really remarkable and amazing things. I often have, you know, young people and smaller children in some of my cases read poems. I've had them share songs that they've written. I've had them play musical instruments in my court. I've had them share recordings of their music. I've had young people sing in my court. And I absolutely agree. I think, you know, someone indicated earlier, art can take so many different forms. And I had a young woman who would come back to visit me and bring her portfolio of, you know, different hairstyles that she was doing, that she wanted to share with me after her case was long gone and she had graduated from school. And it was very artistic, and it was a form of helping others express themselves as well as her self-expression. I've had, you know, the opportunity to have individuals share their sketches, drawings, paintings, all kinds of mixed media, and being on the receiving end of kind of those moments and those shared experiences always really moves me to my core. Having these experiences have changed who I am as a judge. It's also changed who I am as a mom, as well as a community member. And for the youth that I have seen and some of the real successes that I've been able to see that for me are connected to their art, is watching them find their self-expression first through art, and then watching it correlate to their self-advocacy in my courtroom. And when I've been on the receiving end of that, it is an incredible, powerful thing to witness. And it's a great honor to be able to share in that experience with a young person. And I have always been so grateful that they, of all people in the world, that I get a little glimpse into that. Because a courtroom is not a place where you would normally think these experiences would occur. And so I would go back and say the biggest challenge that I see is simply resources. I see a thirst and a hunger for these opportunities. And as it had an impact on me, and I think, quite frankly, those opportunities of self-expression and to have that participation in theater and in dance was life-saving for me. And it allowed my my young brain to develop a little bit further so that I could learn how to make safer and healthier choices and learn how to continue to express myself in a positive way. So thank you for letting me share. Thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you so much for sharing some of your work and your personal experiences. And we have one more panelist to invite into the conversation, and then we'll have a few minutes to start the roundtable discussion. So let's invite Shira into the room. Shira Greenberg from Keshet.
Hi, thank you. Wow, I for a moment forgot I was going to be talking because I was just absorbed in everybody's discussion about this. This is so incredible to have all of these voices here. I think so for, you know, what I'm drawn to about this intersection is that the arts, in my case specifically dance, but really any and all disciplines of the arts, it's just such a critical and beautiful tool for self-expression and self-growth as an individual. And I think sometimes for artists, we can take for granted that our entire sphere of being is often about creating something that didn't exist before, and how beautiful of an experience that is, and the power of that process. And I think then when you translate that and you utilize the arts as a teaching tool and a essentially a gift to share with others in the world, the artistic practice, what that experience is for a young person to be given a platform for their creative voice and their creative choices and the autonomy of taking charge of your voice and your choices in that artistic process is really powerful. And when that then intersects with a system that is currently structured more often than not in a format that takes away voice and choice and autonomy, the arts can really be this lifeline to a space where you have a community that desires to hear that voice, respects that voice, has room for mistakes to be made, room for relationships to be learned and navigated through this very messy and amazing creative process that is art making. So I think from my personal experience working primarily in the direct service side of things, the arts are just this powerful home for individuals who are navigating a system that can feel very dehumanizing. And the arts as this human centering, human honoring space that is really becomes this critical anchor and tether. And so what I think additionally then, you know, what artists sometimes can take for granted, I historically took for granted, is that everything we do as artists, even when we are thinking about non-arts processes, strategic planning and systems development and team building and collaboration, we tend to approach all these tasks with an artistic process at the core of the way that we work, which just naturally allows for a lot of creative problem solving and different process of investigation and excavation into the problem solving process. And so that gets me at this moment very excited about how the artistic practice connects then to systems change, and how does that practice of art making lend itself to systems change conversations. So looking at both of those simultaneously, how do the arts impact and support each individual person? And how does an artistic practice impact and support the process of systems change? So I think in both of those, there's huge successes that happen, and certainly challenges, you know, to take an improvisational artistic practice to policy change can maybe there's some challenges there, you know, but I think that the excitement of both of those elements of what does that mean, arts to human and arts to systems, I'm excited to have this group together to talk about and investigate together and think about. And I think I said to all of us at the beginning, before everybody jumped on as an audience, part of this is to communicate and talk to the whole community about what's going on, what are all these other spokes in the wheel that are going on, but also what comes out of this, and what do we find as we've talked together, and where do we go? What do we learn from today that we take into new practices and new, I mean, I think back to what Sherry said earlier, right? Like not just doing this to do it, but to do it so that it does make change going forward. So, so I'll end there because we have a lot more to talk about, but thank you for being here.
Thanks, Shira. And that's a great transition to what we're about to jump into. So I want to just acknowledge that we have this discussion, this roundtable is supposed to end at 5:30. That is 23 minutes away, and we do want to make sure that we have a few minutes for some questions. So I'm allowing us to slow down to speed up, but also recognizing that we have this sort of finite amount of time. And I want to also express that I'm hopeful that this is one of many conversations that will happen around this topic of arts and juvenile justice. So we've heard a lot of different voices from the panel talking about the impact of arts, the way that arts have impacted personally, and also the work that you're doing. But we want to turn now to this question that Shira just kind of teed up really beautifully, to use a golf term. I don't know why. So, you know, the last year has especially kind of raised up a sort of higher volume of conversation around systemic change. I mean, it's been in the consciousness for a while, but the pandemic and the events of this last year seem to have brought it to a particular volume level. And so what our question is that as you kind of scan the view of the juvenile justice system in this country, with this growing national conversation around systemic change, around reckoning with the past and histories, what are the possibilities that you panelists are seeing and thinking about in this moment? Shira just talked a little bit about some of the things that she's thinking about and seeing. And also, what is the role that arts can play in transforming the juvenile justice system in both our local community and in our country? So again, as you're sort of looking forward and thinking about this particular climate we're in right now of a heightened awareness of this conversation of systemic change, what are the things that you're thinking about? What are you seeing? How do you see the role of arts in this conversation of transforming juvenile justice, both at a local community level and also at a national level? So we're going to go now into highlighting the 9 panelists. So I won't be in the highlight either. And panelists, I would just invite you to share some thoughts, to keep in mind that there are 9 of you, and that we have about 15 minutes of conversation to have. So I trust the generosity of the group. I'm happy to help with the flow, and we'll see how it all goes. Who would like to be?
Oh,
Imani, go.
I'm waiting. I had my mute off and everything. I think there are so many possibilities. The possibilities can be endless. There's so many opportunities that we can create ourselves as part of people who are knowledgeable about the system. But I think it all starts with being honest. I think we as a community, but also the people who construct the juvenile justice system, need to be honest with themselves as well, and the system and the breaks that are present in it before we can move forward. Because before you can move forward, you need to be honest about you and your situation that you're in. So I think that has a lot of impact on itself. Being able to come together as a community and not putting blame, like, you know, I think there's a lot of breaks as far as in the police force. I think there's, as far as how they get trained and things like that, that I have an issue with personally. I don't want to go too much in depth with it, but being a Black woman, being a light-skinned Black woman in America is hard, because you see both sides of things. I was raised around my Caucasian family, but I have my African American roots, and I'm also Mexican. So there's so many different dynamics that I can go about. But being able to be honest about our culture and things that we have glorified as a community that are also prolonging this injustice that we're facing is powerful, because we want to point our finger to the system and say, you did us wrong. And that is true. But to get us to that situation, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, not all the time we have to do something wrong, but there are situations where we've put ourselves in that we're a product from the system, that we're a product from where we were raised and who brought us into this world, but we can choose to change that dynamic. So I think before we can even get to those opportunities, we need to create opportunities for us to come as a community and be therapeutic with our situations and the wrongs that we are also doing.
And I just want to chime in from the video that you guys showed. The phrase that keeps repeating in my head is the system is rigged and it's rotten to the core. And you know, it's a pretty harsh statement, but that's the conversation that I have with kids that are in the system, because what's asked of them is almost impossible to be successful. The hurdles that they've already experienced, but then the next set of circumstances that they are asked to navigate, I mean, you're asking for superheroes, you know. Recently I found a Xerox copy in a parking lot, and it was a list of every vocation that felons cannot be employed at. You know, that, I mean, so already most system impacted people have very narrow ladders to advance. And, you know, like, that's just an incredible system to navigate. And so it's really simple, creative, you know, bringing improvisational dance to budgets, to redeployment of funds. I mean, you know, all those security cameras that we have everywhere, those are about $22,000 a piece. Just think what arts organizations like La Placita, Cachette, like, I can take $22,000 and I can employ artists, I can create relationships, mentorships. There's just so much, you know, creativity and transformation of systems that can occur. But, you know, we need a coalition of people to demand those things and to quell the fear of all these people that have dehumanized these stories of people. You know, that's the biggest thing when I go to meetings of like downtown meetings about crime and all of these things. It's a dehumanization of people, of kids, of people that are lacking resources, you know, and we need to somehow build empathy. And I think arts is that perfect conduit to create those kind of conversations, like Carmela, I'm messing up her name, but, you know, to have those real conversations. It's not about policy, it's about being human, and, you know, and us collectively asking for a different city.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And as we continue to turn this conversation over to some of the other panelists, I just want to remind our audience members that if you have questions, you can type them into the chat and we'll try to get to a few of them at the end. Who else would like to speak to this question about what you're seeing, what you're thinking about, what the role of arts is as we talk nationally and locally about systemic change?
If I could speak, thank you, Sherry. That kind of lends to a little bit of what you're saying, what a little bit of what Imani brought up. You know, I wear kind of multiple hats, and I am a systems person. And so, you know, what I've seen over the years is we really need to move away in the system from looking at art and civic opportunity as community service. And we really need to look at it as something that is valuable to our youth, that's available to our youth, not because you're in trouble now and you have to do community service, it should be art all of a sudden. It really should be an opportunity for youth to be empowered, to show, you know, their successes, their challenges that they live with every day. It should be the opportunity to grow and share their voices. And so You know, as an institution, you know, what I've found over the years is really, it does a disservice to our youth when we look at art as a community service kind of aspect. We really need to engage our young people and listen to their voices in a different aspect, not community service. This is their voice. This is their opportunity to show us, you know, their strength and their willingness, you know, in the community to do great things. And so, you know, that's just kind of one of my pet peeves over time that I've noticed as a systems folks. And the hope is that in the future we can partner with everyone to provide these opportunities that are really life-changing for many of our youth.
Thank you so much, Carmela. It's making me think of what Albino said earlier about reclamation of art, not as punishment and not as community service, but of reclaiming the part of it that is inherently a part of each person. Other thoughts from our panelists, other ideas or thoughts?
I hope I'm not like stealing somebody's spotlight. I just have lots of things to say. I think this also brings light to what Julie had said in the very beginning about Ashira as well. We need to get to these kids before they're in the correctional facilities, before they've already messed up and now they are faced with something that's going to be on their record. Stopping the school to prison pipeline and teaching teachers, I think a lot of it is about education. When you look at why so many kids are in detention, maybe they don't care about the system, or they never learned about the system, or the system that they learned was completely different from what is already in place. I think a lot of the times, me, myself, I've been homeless and I've been a part of the system, not as far as being locked up, but child services and things like that. So I think a lot of the times, like Carmela was saying, you start getting resources after you've already been put in a situation where your life is kind of messed up. Instead of helping these kids while they're in school, and getting them to stay out of the streets. I went to Highland High School, and I don't if you don't know where that's at, it's, if you ask people who are from Albuquerque, they're going to be like, that is such a ghetto school and they don't do this and they don't do that. We have a letter D for our school grade, but because we have that, they have took away so much funding. You would think because these kids are failing and they're skipping and they're on drugs and they're teen moms, like they would want to give funding, but they took it away from us. And so we lost out on so many different programs. And I seen kids that I grew up with who are now getting faced with murder charges because school wasn't where they wanted to be. The teachers weren't there to help them. And they see them as problem kids, and they would rather them be out on the streets doing whatever instead of in school learning about things that matter, things that can change their life. So I'm just a proud believer in breaking the school to prison pipeline and providing resources before they even get there.
Thank you so much, Imani. We have a few more minutes for conversation. I'd love to invite into the space Albino or Marisa or Julie or Marie, any other voices, Shira, that we haven't, Manuel, that we haven't heard from.
I can chime in. I started with the theme of liberation, and I think we can't really talk about liberation without talking about abolition. And I know that's a controversial topic to bring up, but the more I read about abolition and the more I educate myself about the underlying tenets and principles and research around abolition, the more I am convinced that it is the solution. When Imani's talking about more investment in education, when Sherry's talking about more investment in healthcare and in housing, these are all tenets that inform abolitionist theory. I think that a world without prisons is being imagined and talked about. I think that it's gaining increasing visibility particularly in social media spaces, and it's gaining increasing viability. What we have seen historically is greater investment in for-profit prisons, greater investment in surveillance technologies. Those don't work. And we know through research that that greater financial investment doesn't usually correlate with increasing or decrease, that it doesn't correlate with decreasing crime rates. And so we really need to look at whether the data is actually justifying that expense, when in fact we could do what abolitionists are calling for and really putting safety in the hands of local communities, really investing in education, in housing, in jobs, in opportunities for people to have better lives before, like Imani said, they get in these circumstances and their lives spin out of control. Beyond that, I think programs like the M3 program that I'm super inspired by are absolutely necessary as a pathway for reintegration. And that's the kind of investment we need as a community. We need more programs like that that are really giving students who are not students, youth who are affected by the carceral system opportunities for reintegration. And I want to just say as a final point, I got a news alert today that New Mexico is on the verge of decriminalizing marijuana. What does this mean for the youth who have been impacted by the carceral system, who are sitting in our youth detention centers because they have marijuana arrests? We really need to think about these things.
Thank you so much, Marisa. That's a great point. Manuel, I see you unmuted for a moment.
Yeah, I want to build off of that. I'm always moved by the quote from Alice in Wonderland, and I know Shira will appreciate this, and the Keshet crew that created the Alice show. But I really do believe that imagination is the only weapon in the war against reality. And when you think about the role that arts plays, it needs to play a much more prominent role in the economic development agenda, not only of the state, but in the way that we relate to other entities throughout the world. The United States over the past 4 years has fundamentally nearly destroyed some of its international relationships. Some of them are vital for the lifeblood and the growth of not only our country, but to recognize the interconnectedness of everybody on planet Earth. And it's going to be, I think New Mexico is poised to be a very unique place where we actually do our own thing. We actually do our own diplomacy thing for a little while and try to explore how we relate to people in other ways. To Imani's point, just because you got a grade D in something doesn't mean that you should be ignored or that you should be isolated. New Mexico has been ignored and isolated for a very long time. And I have often said, and I'll say it in every speaking chance I get, we are not the 50th state. We are the first emerging economy in the United States. We are the very first. And diplomatically, if we start to use that and create an arts-driven agenda inside of that, we actually can become an economic driver that connects to the scale of the world economy that we don't even know yet. The last thing I'll say about that is that kids in this generation are going to inherit problems and challenges that we have not yet scripted into our laws or our policymaking matrix. The digital economy that is going to be coming down the pipeline in the next 30 years is going to be filled with all sorts of emotional, psychological, economic, and political challenges that we're going to have to confront. And people are going to get left behind, and they're going to get pushed into systems that are going to exploit them and ultimately put them into some sort of, they're going to be criminalized in a way that's not, it's not necessary if we take advantage of thinking and imagining a world inside of that where we take control of our own destiny and imagine what those social landscapes look like for the future. And that begins by our policymakers recognizing the grand importance of art in the economy. During COVID, this last year, the World Bank is going to report that creative work was 5% of the global economy. During COVID, it raised to 38%. And that's you're talking about food, energy, and everything else. 38% of the world economy was creative work that was done from homes, that was done in isolation. So that sort of stuff needs to be respected in the context of those people who have been criminalized and isolated and made vulnerable by this system.
Well, and it needs to be funded too. You know, I have the privilege of being in two worlds. I work in construction, and the inequity of funding in, you know, remodeling someone's bathroom compared to getting an arts grant, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous inequity. You know, and if we look at budgets of the city, the same kind of thing, the inequity is out there.
Well, if I could respond to that, I actually think we also need to do a better job as economic development people to think about how that creative work is valued and connects to markets. So it doesn't always have to be grant driven. There are actually a lot of other ways in which we can tap into the world economy in a way that we're not thinking about, because we always say that art is quaint and it doesn't deserve a special place in that kind of place where we say we're doing market driven work.
Yeah, public art commissions haven't changed in 20 years. They're the exact same, $15,000, no matter what the scale.
Yeah,
for the city of Albuquerque.
I know that there are so many ideas and that this is such a rich conversation. I'm also conscious of time, which is strange for me because I'm not usually, but we're gonna sort of slip slightly past 5:30, but only by about 5 minutes. And I want to just make sure that we have a chance to hear from a few of the other panelists who maybe haven't had a chance to share yet. I know there are a couple questions coming into the chat and some reflections from people's own experiences. Thank you, Monica, and somebody else above who I can't see in the chat right this second, but so that I just want to have a couple minutes to hear from, thank you so much for the comments so far, from Marie, from Juliana, from Albino, from Shira. Any thoughts as we're recognizing what a rich conversation this is and how we must have several others. So I've just opened the floor to those four who haven't had a chance to share thoughts. And Imani, I want to hear all about the things you have to say, but I'm just going to try to hold some space.
No, it's go for it.
Thanks.
So I'm sorry, because I'm also been looking at the time for a little while, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to let others talk because I don't know how to get to the point sometimes. But here it is. Boy, so much was said, and I don't want to put a downer on anything, but I come from what's hitting me right now is the colonization of art, and and then who owns what art is and how it's defined and how it's appreciated in the world. I'm a bona fide 8th grader. People don't know that, but I've never made it in public school past 8th grade. And yet I traveled around the world, which is pretty cool. I resented art. I didn't understand it. When I was in school, the little I was, they would talk about, Rembrandt. They would talk about, artists from all over the world when I was a kid in schools and stuff. And I didn't understand it. But one day, I received an award and it took me around the world. And I found myself in Amsterdam, of all places, staying in a little teeny hotel room across the street from the Rijksmuseum. And I didn't even know what it was. Everybody was walking the streets and coming to this museum across the street. And I went to see what was all the big deal. And I saw a real Rembrandt. And I was floored. I never thought, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I don't have the words to describe how humankind could create such a visual thing. It was like, it's unbelievable. I still don't have the word. And down the street, there was another museum. What's the name of that guy that cut his ear off?
Van Gogh.
I went to his museum and I saw where he came up. I saw his art. And it changed me. Right? From I struggle. I have tension with art. But today, without those experiences, ultimately, I think one day, I want to take the artists of La Placita and I want to get a grant and I want to go around the world with them I want to show them spaces and places and stuff because we're artists. Man, we got art that goes back thousands of years right here, our art. But it's like art is transcendent, man. It takes you places, man. It transcends everything. It's a transcendent piece. And here at La Placita, with all of you, we invite you, please come and let's transcend. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Albino. Let's go to Juliana, and then we'll go to Marie, and then we'll go to Shira. Just really appreciating all the things being spoken into this space. What visionaries we have. Go ahead, Juliana.
I just really quickly wanted to address Paul's question in the chat about dismantling white supremacy. Last semester, actually, I had a really long conversation with Dr. Finney Coleman about that. And I just ended up with more questions than I started with. But from what he told me is it's so deeply rooted in everything that America is based on. I mean, obviously, but just everything. All of our media, all of our systems, our government is all based on white supremacy. And so dismantling it and eradicating it seems really far out. We've been doing it little by little over the years, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight, unfortunately. However, because of that conversation, I was really inspired, and I ended up writing a proposal about how to bring down youth recidivism rates within New Mexico, and I ended up doing a lot of research. And from what I found, a lot of it was based off of Keshet's M3 program, actually. Like replacing the justice system with the restorative justice system really isn't that far out. Like dismantling white supremacy is a very long-term goal, I think, but fixing the justice system really isn't so far out, especially with the work that's being done like right now in this moment. So I think if there was more funding and more access to all of this information and the programming and everything, it could be like not a quick switch, but something that happens within the next couple decades, years, hopefully this year. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. But
thank you so much, Juliana. Great. And I'm also really impressed that you caught the questions. That's great that you jumped in on a question. Let's hear just a couple more points from Judge Marie Ward and from Shira Greenberg, and then we'll just quickly close. And we just know that this is one we hope a series of conversations that we can have like this. So go ahead, Marie.
So in my office, I have a number of quotes, and as Amani was talking and several others, I found this one on my wall, and I've always loved it. And it talks about the true purpose of arts in education is not necessarily to create more professional dancers or artists, although that's wonderful. It is to create a complete human being who are critical thinkers, who have curious minds, and who can lead productive lives. And so, and that's always spoken to me in terms of just the work that I do and the young people that I get to be involved with. I think there are a lot of things that are coming to mind in terms of this discussion, as a judge in the system, systemic racism, explicit and implicit bias are always something that I work really hard to make sure that I'm always keeping at the forefront of my mind, and every time I'm going to court, anytime that I have a decision to make, I'm trying to be very conscientious in all of those decisions. And I think it's important for anybody that works in these systems and works in these systems to try to make change too, is conscientious of those things. I know for me, I talked about earlier that I could have been involved in the systems. I know, well, I'm pretty positive because of my own interactions at different times in my youth with law enforcement. If my ethnicity was different, the color of my skin was different, then my journey would likely have been very different. And so I'm always very mindful of the path that I was able to proceed upon, that other youth are not as fortunate. And so one of the things that I think is we're obligated as those that work within the system is to find opportunities, first of all, in the community that keeps youth from coming into our system. And then once they come into our system, what are pathways to have them exit our system, right? And the arts is one of, I think, one of the most powerful draws and that we can have. You know, young people, individuals are going to be drawn to all kinds of different things. But the arts are really compelling in many ways. And so I agree with Carmela completely. This should not be an obligation. I would never order somebody to do community service in that respect. But if they have an interest and a passion, I want to get them the resources so that, you know, I don't have to see them in my capacity ever again, and they have the opportunities that I was given as a young person. So I appreciate the time that you've given me today.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective and your thoughts. Shira, do you want to do like a final thought from this piece of the conversation, and then we'll wrap up?
Sure, yeah. Well, one, I think we need a series of conversations because there's a lot to talk about and a lot to dig into. But, you know, what I was hearing, you know, and Imani said this word specifically, but I really heard this thread coming through everybody of this term of honesty, and honesty for the beautiful things, and honesty, you know, for the things that are not working, that we have to reckon with and take apart and rebuild. And you know, Albino, you said this, you know, the downer, but I don't think it's the downer, it's the honesty, it's the lens of we have to look at the parts that are positive and negative, and the roles we play in all of that narrative, and what are the things we do going forward. We have to be honest of where this has built from and where do we go going forward. And that's where I just feel like when I think of the word honesty, that parallels the arts to me. Like, that is an artistic practice can only be honest. I feel like that's where you just get to the core of everything, of who you are, and a human connection. And that doesn't work if it's not honest. That doesn't mean it's perfect or clean, or, you know, there's messiness to that, but that's, I think, the beauty of that practice, and why we're drawn to it, because we're drawn to human connection, and we're drawn to how we express that connectivity, which I do think, you know, to Manuel, to your point, we were all disconnected. And so this urgency of connectivity, even through this, you know, this time, this is where the arts like just had to, I can only do, I have to do an interpretive dance about it. But so, yeah, I just feel like honesty is that word, Imani, that's sticking with me, that ties to what this work is. So I'll end with that, I think.
Thank you so much, Shira. Wow, I could just sit here for the next 3 hours and listen to all of you share your perspectives and ideas, and continue to dive into this conversation about the role of arts and its capacity to support and impact change, and really changing systems. I think certainly this panel, the thread I'm hearing, and I want to just lift up, I've heard a few people say, well, I'm not necessarily an artist myself, but I believe that connecting people and holding spaces for connection is an art. And I believe that seeing and supporting others is an art. So there's artistic form that I've seen present in each of the panelists. So we all, I think I would agree that arts are incredibly powerful. The arts are incredibly powerful. We see that in the way that sometimes systems respond to artists by not supporting them, or actually by trying to hide them away. So may we stand in the power of arts moving forward. Thank you all so much for sharing so generously of your experiences, of your ideas. And as Shira said, let's try to make this into a series of conversations. I do want to also take a moment to thank some behind the scenes folks, Anna and Adrian and Sonia, who are doing a lot of the technical support from Keshet. And I also want to let you know that we're going to pop a survey, a poll quickly into, there it is on the screen, right in the middle of the screen for me. And if you are willing to take a moment just to respond to this, it would be incredibly helpful as we look for ways of supporting more of this conversation and more of this work. And with that, just thanks to all of the attendees. We are going to save the chat. I'm sorry we didn't get to more questions. Thanks to Juliana for catching one of them. Thanks to all the comments that we saw in the chats. We will hold on to that information and look forward to the next opportunity to really be in this space together. Thank you for your work, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening and a wonderful weekend. And thanks again for the opportunity to be part of this, Shira. Please fill out the survey. See you soon. Thank you so much.